You're listening to
CRST,
the podcast
from Bryn Mawr Communications.
Hello and welcome. I'm Amanda Cardwell Carones.
And I'm Francesco Carones.
And together we'll be your host for this episode of CRST, the podcast.
And today we will be discussing some of the concepts explored in the CRST's June issue, which focused on rebounding after the pandemic and for which we served as guest medical editors. Although the devastation of the pandemic is undeniable, so too are the many opportunities for positive change that it bore out.
We were honored to help develop the content for this cover focus and sought to highlight topics and solutions that can have a positive impact on our future and that of our patients. We are especially honored today to be joined by our guests, Drs. Arthur Cummings, Blake Williamson, and Chuck Williamson, who will be discussing their articles from the issue. Arthur, Chuck, Blake, thank you for joining us. Why don't we begin with some introductions?
Hi, Francesco and Amanda, and thank you for this opportunity. I thought it was a great article in our CRST edition. I think it was both sides of the Atlantic, and certainly learned a lot from reading everyone's experiences.
Hey, everybody, this is Blake Williamson from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the Williamson Eye Center. And I'd echo that. I think this is super timely. We are based in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We practice cataract surgery. We are about 15 doctors strong now with 7 locations throughout our area here in Louisiana. We're a multi-generational practice where I practice with my father, Dr. Charles Williamson, who's also with us today.
I just echo what Arthur and Blake said. This is certainly timely, and glad to be on this podcast with my friends and my son.
Arthur, everybody knows you as well as the Williamsons, but maybe the audience is also interested in knowing a little bit more about your practice.
Right, so my practice is cataract and refractive, and I'm based in Dublin and Ireland. And it's a small practice. We staff of 20-something, but I'm the only surgeon at the moment. My son's joining me. I can't wait to have what Chuck and Blake have. He's joining me in about a year's time. But for now, I'm the only surgeon with a big team of optometrists. And collectively, we get through quite a bit of work.
Great. So thank you all again for being here. And let's begin with the discussion of Arthur's article, which touches on the myriad positive changes made in his practice that were brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. Arthur, what are some of the changes your practice made that ended up having a positive impact overall?
Yeah, Francesco, that's such an interesting question. I co-wrote an article with David Lockington some months ago on some of the things that happened during the pandemic. And David used a term where he said he landed up avoiding detours rather than taking shortcuts, because a lot of the changes we brought about were really just avoiding all the detours of the past. In the past, we'd see patients on day 1, on day 5, on month 1, month 3, and we just saw patients too frequently post-operatively. And Brendan, my son, who's now in his 6th year of residency, said, "Dad, no one else is seeing patients this frequently post-operatively." So we started seeing them less frequently in the last 18 months since we've done that. Haven't had one patient ring up and say there's a problem in the interim. So it sort of makes you realize all that time spent seeing post-operative patients was unnecessary. And it's a burden on them too, having someone bring them in and this sort of thing, which means there was a lot more capacity within the clinic to see new patients. So it's a quieter, more efficient environment. That was quite good during the pandemic times. Now that, things are under slightly better control, things are getting busier again, and we're seeing patients again, more patients, but the patients we're seeing are now new patients coming in for surgery. So that was the first thing. We started doing a lot less post-operative visits. We started making our communication system within the practice very much more modern. So a lot of it was taken away from the telephone and a lot more done electronically and digitally and within the patient's control, so they can make their own appointments. They can do it at a time that suits them and on a platform that suits them. They could do it from their phone, from wherever. And then we started doing payments online. That's all done online now. People basically pay before they come in. Our consents have gone digital. We use DocuSign to do that. And yeah, generally speaking, we've seen an increase in demand. And despite this increase in demand, we've found that servicing these patients or seeing these patients has become a lot more efficient. And it seems that the practice seems less like a train station. So that was basically the gist of my article, that in the way we restructured things is we've become more efficient, more effective, and yet the place is quieter and a nicer place to visit.
Well, thank you, Arthur. That is impressive. Let me comment on what we did. Amanda is also working in my practice as the strategic director for most of the patient outreach. And one of the biggest problem we had was really seeing the patients because never forget that the lockdown in Italy was very hard at the point that people could not walk around without a permit. And we and the patients felt the need of seeing faces more than just hearing voices. So we learned that communicating with the patients through videos instead of through like written pieces or even phone calls was much more effective. So our website has been redesigned to have many more videos. And also, very recently, and this is again a suggestion that Amanda gave us, we started contacting the patients through videos and welcoming them before seeing them with some clips recorded by the doctors or by the technicians or by the staff, just thanking the patients and saying we are so excited that you're going to show up maybe tomorrow. Let's give it as an example, and we are so excited about our possibility to improve your vision and make your life easier. So that is one of the areas where we did a lot. The other area where we worked quite a lot was on the patient's flow reorganization. Thanks to a kind of journey that it is possible to be done in the clinic, we really have I mean we are not using like waiting rooms any longer, so patients are not going back to an area where to stay when they are dilated and all of that. And we liked also to involve one single either tech or optometrist for taking care of the patients. So at the end of the journey, the patient actually sees only one single person, let's say at the reception, one single person during the entire journey for diagnosis and consultation for surgery, and one single doctor at the end. So this made the practice much more efficient. And again, that was generated by the need of COVID, not to meet with too many people, but as well as the video issue, the flow reorganization is one of the changes that we maintained and we took a lot of advantage about. What do you think, Amanda?
No, I was just going to say that completely agree to Francesco's point. In our practice, one of our key differentiators is the patient experience that we deliver, especially compared to what most patients are expecting through the public health system. So with the COVID lockdown and trying to reduce potential exposure, that also brought about a challenge of how do we maintain that patient experience and develop a personal relationship with each patient when we're trying to throughput them as quickly as possible to get them in and out. So that's why we decided to start implementing these brief video clips to welcome the patient in advance, to give them that sense that they've spent a little more time with, and these are recorded video clips that we were sending out via messaging, so that they had the impression they had spent more time with the surgeon than they actually had. And then ensuring that post-operatively, we had started this before, and I think now it's taken on a new appreciation after COVID, or during and after COVID, that we each of the surgeons, the evening of surgery, they send an individualized, a personalized message to each patient who had surgery that day, just to check on them, let them know that they're there if they need anything, and that really has gone a long way in building, trust and rapport with the patients as well. So it's not just before surgery, but even the day of, the doctor reaches out to me to check and make sure that I'm doing well that evening. So I think that that's really helped us to stay close, despite the fact that we're having to limit the amount of time that we were spending with each individual patient. What about you, Blake and Chuck? Do you have a similar experience? What changes did you guys have to make within your practice, and have any of those stuck around since the restrictions have lifted?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think that we should. I was talking to Marnix and Sebastian Heersink of a massive practice in Alabama about this very thing. we should get together and form some type of formalized study specifically around one small aspect of this, and that is the 1 day post-op experience for patients. Because, like Author and many others around the world, we immediately stopped doing the 1 day post-op, both for cataract and for laser vision correction. And it has been a phenomenal thing for both patients and surgeon throughout our practice, and one of the biggest game changers that we have. We're doing routinely over 5,000 cataracts each year, and 99.9% of the time for a cataract surgery that's very routine, no complications, no added MIG surgeries or anything to it, just a straightforward cataract. 99.9% of the time, we walk in the room for 30 seconds and say, "Yep, looks good, patient's happy," and we're out the door. And we forget about how challenging it can be for those patients to even get there. We have 7 locations throughout our area, and our furthest satellites are over an hour and a half away from each other. So in many instances, these patients are having to drive 1-2 hours to come and see us just for us to walk in for 30 seconds. And so we just don't think it's the right thing to do. So instead, we moved to virtual 1 day post-ops where the doctor themselves, me, in my case, it's me, log in right when I get there, and my scribe has all. I usually do about 30 to 35 cataract surgeries in a morning, so she has all 30 to 35 post-ops in a virtual waiting room. So I text her when I'm about 10 minutes away from my location to start, loading patients into the room. It sends them a text. We use the Doxy.me platform, and then they're able to log in into our virtual waiting room. And so they're waiting there for me. So I can very quickly get an audio visual 2-way, call communication with that patient. And I love it, even though, yes, I probably could get an optometrist or even a technician to do those for me. For me, it's just, having that minute or two with the patient is wonderful because they get to see my face. We get to, ask about their experience. Oftentimes on the surgery day, it's not a very personal experience because I'm doing so many cases. Sometimes I don't get to meet with every patient. So instead, this is our time post-operatively to have with each other, just to, check in and make sure they're happy. So that's been huge. We also do virtual LASIK consults now, which is great. We learned before that if we just had a phone call, then and asked the patient to come in for all of their scans and everything to meet the doctor, the fact that the chance that they'll actually come in physically to meet the doctor and get their scans is about 35% less than if we were doing it with a video. So now all of our people who ring us up on Facebook or just call the office, what happens is our refractive counselor will actually arrange a Zoom call with them or a FaceTime, and just that face-to-face interaction has boosted their actual entrance into our practice and in our physical practice has boosted that 35% versus phone call alone. So there's something about seeing someone that really kind of makes a difference. So those are 2 areas that we've used telemedicine. And even in some cataract consults as well, because we're so geographically spread, we have some patients that just can't get there. So they'll come into one of my satellites, they'll do their OCT MAC, their wide field fundus image, they'll do their topography, tomography, really all the point of care testing and diagnostics, as well as a little video slit lamp exam, about 20 seconds for each eye. And all that gets emailed to me. And then I'll be able to review all of that and decide, what we think this patient's a candidate for. At that point, I can hop on a Zoom or a FaceTime with the patient, discuss their options, and we make a decision from there. And that prevents them from having to drive, so far to see me. Of course, I always do take a quick look at them with a slit lamp exam on the day of surgery. I always want to just look at it myself one last time before bringing them into the OR. But doing that has really been able to maximize our efficiency and it's provided really it's been a wonderful thing for the patients. It makes things much easier.
Wow, Blake, this is impressive, a great organization. And Chuck, do you want to add something to what Blake just said? What about your practice?
Certainly, telemedicine was very foreign to us that time, and in the United States, we didn't have the laws. We really caught up with the technology until the pandemic came, because the point of service where the telemedicine actually came from, the consults came from, had to be the laws had to be in place so that they allowed us to actually do it all from one place and even do it remotely from home. The other things that occurred on a national level was that they they relaxed the payment, you know, the payment requirements and things like that, which is still ongoing. As a matter of fact, it's been kind of continued to be promoted in 60-day increments, but it will still continue in the United States as it is, which allows telemedicine to grow for 151 days if it is canceled at some point after it's canceled. So what Blake had described really was a tremendous help for us because we were getting bottlenecks with just the amount of surgery coming in and to be able to manage that. And for Blake, as he's doing more and more surgery, and it was helpful for him to be able to manage his time.
Well, thank you, Chuck, for these wonderful comments. Let's move on to your article, Blake and Chuck. It looked at the ways in which the pandemic affected the refractive surgery specifically and outlined the case for why it should be a standalone global specialty. How and why do you think the pandemic changed the status quo of refractive surgery? And is there anything we can learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, this was a black swan event, as our article talks about, and made us ask a couple questions. Why and how did the pandemic change the status quo, and what lessons did we learn? What do we have left to learn? What are we going to do differently from this? And so, for me, I think this is largely started really over the past few years. Even before the pandemic, I have residents that will come in and watch us do surgery. You realize very quickly that they just don't get a lot of training here in the United States on refractive surgery. If you looked at the median of primary PRK and LASIK performed by a resident in 2009, a graduating resident, the median was 0. So literally, the most common thing that people are doing if they're graduating and they're saying it's a refractive surgery that they're doing, they're not actually doing it themselves. In fact, you can just get your 6 requirement surgeries. You can get that from just watching a fellow or even attending do the case. So oftentimes we would learn from these young doctors coming to visit us that they're just not getting the training, and in fact that's why they're spending their time watching us. And so we've kind of had an understanding that this needed to change. And something interesting happened during the pandemic where, all of a sudden, we all started meeting virtually, right? So, my podcast that I do, we were starting to do that every week, and that became a really sort of a town hall. And then there was an explosion of meetings and podcasts and virtual opportunities to learn. And so, I think that one thing that we decided, along with some refractive surgeons all over the world, is that we've really identified the need to have something different in the future for those who are required or who are seeking the designation of being a refractive surgeon. And that's where the World College of Refractive Surgery and Visual Sciences really came into being. The interest of the World College really is to teach and promote and expand the specialty and the science of refractive surgery globally. We aim to increase the number of trained refractive surgeons and to establish refractive surgery as its own standalone specialty by providing oversights and evaluations, credentialing through education and training and certification. You can look at plastic surgery. They have their own specialty. Even retina kind of has its own subspecialty and its own sort of governance. Yet at refractive surgery, we have not had that. In fact, it's never even been proposed. And so, that's why we joined, several other thought leaders around the world in sort of trying to identify this as an opportunity to sort of grow refractive surgery just by simply having enough surgeons who identify as refractive surgeons. Even though there's 28,000 ophthalmologists in this country, only 10% of them identify as refractive surgeons. And in fact, 500 to 700 even really do the majority of the cases. 75% of the cases are done by 700 surgeons in this country. And that's a shame. We think that we can do better with that. And so that's what our article sort of aims at.
That's impressive. And Chuck, you are one of the visionaries of the World College. I'm sure you want to comment on it as well.
Yes, I think the World College was basically the pandemic gave us some time to actually reflect. And, when you're doing some reflection on your practice and your time management and things like that, are certain things that stand out, and one was that refractive surgery had rapidly, at the beginning of this century, the technology caught up to a point that it became a really a specialty in its own right. And as all of you know, we have some international forums that we go back and forth, and we'll find internationally that there may be 8 or 9 different ways that people comment on how to treat a particular refractive case, which shows that there's extreme diversity in the world. And most people, most refractive surgeons were very isolated, meaning they did things the way they did them, and they really didn't have much contact with a lot of other refractive surgeons until they went to 1 or 2 international meetings, perhaps a year, or in-person meetings, and those were fairly curated, very quick, and kind of dominated by KOL or industry-sponsored talks. So the reality and free dialogue with people all over the world suddenly changed and shifted this phenomenon of refractive surgery, the need for it to become an isolated specialty, much like other specialties have already done: retina, cornea, plastics, things like that. Nobody today would possibly consider having a retinal surgery by someone that didn't have credentials in retinal surgery, wasn't credentialed. And someone who grew up with this, I started practice in 1979. So all these procedures were easier for me because they got offloaded over 40 years. I used to do all of my own corneal transplants. I did all of my retina. I was one of the last fully trained surgeons who did everything from DCRs to exenerations to retinal detachments, corneal transplants, things like this. Well, as time went on, and the practice got busier, and specialists, subspecialists, and specialists arose in their area, I was able to concentrate primarily my time on cataract and refractive, but all of the refractive techniques that we learned over the years, I had all that time. When Blake got out, he was kind of hit all at once with all of this, and so we did a year fellowship, and basically, I think that was able to, in our practice, we had a busy practice, that was able to quickly bring him on board into what he needed to do very fast. But private fellowships are not very available. They're not freely available in many areas, and people kind of have to learn on the job. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot of time to do that. So we're trying to set standards and to basically increase the value of what we're doing. And we're also doing this with the idea that there needs to be a worldview, and therefore the College of Refractive Surgery and Visual Sciences actually has separate advisory councils in different regions around the world, because we know that the practice culturally, and the practice, because what they're able to do or what they're allowed to do, varies in different regions. So this was a really eye opener for us, and I think something that has been badly needed at this point. And no one was doing that. No one had even suggested doing that. So that's kind of what the pandemic kind of allowed, and I think the visionary group, some of which are on here, spent a year together every week, and kind of went through all the different things and concepts that we had to do to make this a reality.
Thanks, Jack. Great words and very inspirational. I'd like to hear Arthur's comments as well, because Arthur is one of the visionaries, as I am. And then I'd like to hear also Amanda's comments to hear the voice from someone who is not a physician, not a refractive surgeon, but very close to this world, being part of the industry and being part of my personal, my office, your patient outreach strategies and all of that. Arthur.
So I can't really say it any better than what Chuck and Blake did. I think they've summarized it beautifully. I think for me personally is every time we were at a meeting and for whatever reason the World Health Organization stats were put up, on the global burden of visual impairment, we'd sort of see that 40% is due to uncorrected refractive error, 35% is due to cataract, and all of us on the call, readily acknowledge that cataract is nothing more than refractive error. If you're going to, once the patient is aphakic, they now need a refractive correction. And why would you not put the best possible correction in rather than something where you require glasses afterwards? And then we look at things like AMD, 2%, glaucoma, 2%, and we suddenly realize that the biggest burden and the elephant in the room and affecting young people who should be productive and on the go and working and contributing to their local economies is just being ignored. And 20 years ago, there was this big drive to, by the year 2020, have a lot of these people into spectacles and seeing better and functioning better. And that never happened. 2020 has come and gone, and that never happened. So this is the ideal opportunity to change the perception of refractive surgery. Refractive surgery, to a large degree, is seen to be people who are sort of self-serving, do things for their own benefit. And we have an amazing opportunity to change the way the world sees refractive surgery and really to change the way that the world sees. We all know the benefits of refractive surgery. Some subgroups do. We know the elite sportsmen know it, first responders, the military, they all understand the benefits of refractive surgery. But people who don't, in fairness, are our colleagues. Our ophthalmic colleagues aren't always aware. I think our optometric colleagues may be quite aware, but sometimes see it as being competitive, so wouldn't readily refer always. And our patients certainly see the benefits. But if we can universally raise the standard, raise the bar, and within the college, we keep on speaking about the aviation industry, where when you get onto an aeroplane, you don't really ask for the pilot's credentials because if they've been through flight school, they've been validated by the airline they're flying for, they're going to be fine. And we'd like refractive surgery to be along the same lines, that if you're fortunate enough to go to the Williamson Eye Center for your LASIK, well, that's great. But if you don't go there and you go some other place that practices differently, you mightn't get the same result. And those poor results or the poor aftercare or the poor experience all reflects on refractive surgery. So if we raise the standards and the quality and the bar across refractive surgery globally, we do the entire vision correction space a huge benefit. More people will want to accrue of the benefits or take advantage of the benefits. And as Chuck said, or Blake said, we don't have enough opportunity to train. So the World College is working closely with the RSA, putting in fellowships across the world where we can train surgeons. And surgeons can train in places where traditionally refractive surgery is not available, which means you now start serving those underprivileged areas in the training process, but it's an accredited good program. So you're doing good surgery. It's not like you're practicing somewhere. You're doing good surgery under guidance. And I think we've got an amazing opportunity. I think all of us on the call, Blake may be an exception given where he is in his career, but have had long careers, and we can sit back and reflect on a personal career. But I don't think that's the way we should see this. This is a mark in the sand. What we'd like to see when we retire one day is that there were a group of people who came together and said, refractive surgery, we're at the place now, the time is right, the equipment is right, the standard of technology is correct, the will is there, the finances are there. Let's make this a mark where we changed the way the world saw refractive surgery, and we started treating people and made refractive surgery a first rite of passage when you can't see well. It's one of the things you think of first rather than as an afterthought 10 years down the line or 20 years down the line.
Wow, that again is impressive. It's very inspirational. As a surgeon who already had made his career, I cannot agree with you more, both Arthur, Chuck, and Blake. Amanda, what's your voice? What are your thoughts about it?
Well, Arthur, you said it's an amazing opportunity, but I'd also say it's a very timely opportunity. As someone who's not a surgeon, but who's been heavily involved or solely involved in refractive surgery, either working for manufacturers or as a practice growth consultant, for the past 20 years, refractive surgery is near and dear to my heart. And I find it very frustrating to see the market grow so slowly. The penetration rate of, refractive procedures grow so slowly. And I think a lot of doctors today, look at their volume over the past 2 years and they see that their volume has increased and they think that, this is an upswing that is sustainable. But, I think if we don't really put the focus around it with, education, patient awareness, driving better outcomes through better training, it won't be sustainable and it may plateau off. And I think that I was very happy to hear a couple of weeks ago we were in Antwerp at the European ACOS Congress, and there was significant discussion there around not just the need for better training, but also around developing a common vernacular regarding refractive surgery that all of industry, whether we're talking about manufacturers or we're talking about surgeons, rally around so that we can drive share of voice. So if we're going to be, working on improving training and driving better outcomes with the surgeons who are performing these procedures, also aligning, the way in which we as industry speak about these procedures, the way manufacturers speak with doctors, and the way the doctors will turn around and speak with patients, so that we're driving more share of voice regarding the procedures that are available. So that, when a patient, let's say it's a frustrated presbyope, starts looking for options that are available, they know specifically what phrase to look for. I did an interesting Google search. I went to one of the main professional societies in the U.S. and I looked at their website, and a host of different procedures are listed, but lens replacement surgery is not one of them. And, if we can come up with a common vernacular, where a common phrase that everyone uses, everyone rallies behind, to create awareness, I think that we'll be able to start driving more procedures that way. And we want those patients to be able to find the right doctors to perform those procedures when they start looking for places where these options are offered.
Well, it's so nice to hear this alignment in between the ophthalmologists as refractive surgeons and the industry. And really, I hope and I see a great future for not only the World College, but also for the refractive surgery movement as a whole. So, Amanda, thank you. And this brings us to the conclusion of this episode of the CRST, the podcast. Arthur, Blake, and Charles, thank you so much for being a part of this discussion and for contributing such thoughtful articles to the June issue cover focus. It was a pleasure to curate, and we encourage you all to give it a read. Thanks for tuning in.
To learn more about the articles discussed in this episode and to read all of those featured in CRST's June issue, click the link in the show notes or head over to crstoday.com. And for more shows like the one you just listened to, check out the podcast channel on itube.net.